Well, it is a triumphant day for voters, for American democracy. Today's historic Supreme Court ruling in Moore versus Harper halts political overreach by Republicans in North Carolina. In defending the rights of state courts to review election matters, the Supreme Court has prevented an unbalanced map favoring the Republican Party. Now, this judgment solidifies authority of state courts against partisan gerrymandering and upholds fair election laws across the country. I'm excited to have this interview today with Rev. Al Sharpton because we talk about voting rights all the time. Rev, in this case, which is seen as a victory, explain how this ruling might impact marginalized communities, Black communities, particularly in states like North Carolina, where gerrymandering has been a huge concern.
It has been a huge concern in North Carolina, and the ramifications could have been devastating nationally had the court upheld what the state legislature in North Carolina wanted to do. So Moore versus Harper is a critical case. What it said in effect is that the state legislature was saying in North Carolina that if they set a district and they did their set up the guidelines of a district, set up the map of a district, that you couldn't go to the courts to challenge the legislature. What the legislature did, what they decided, could not be challenged by the courts. And the Supreme Court has said that the courts have a right to review and challenge and see, in effect, if what the state legislators did were unfair. This is right on the back of them saying a similar ruling in Alabama. So I think that what we're seeing, to the surprise of many, including me, is this conservative court is saying, even we are not going to let you end up going back to states' rights on voting. And I think that it is critical because all of these states have tried to change voting laws and change districts so that you have in the case of Alabama, where they only had one congressional district, despite the large population of Blacks in the state, they only had one Black congressional representative. In Louisiana, we heard that case yesterday. Yes. They only had one Black representative, and I think it's like over 40% of the state. And now you have in North Carolina where they're saying the courts can make the legislature go back. So these are 2 to 3 clear victories out of this court. And I think it's important. I think that we cannot let our guard down because these states will try to then come with decisions that are just underneath their decision, because it does not change these states' laws that have changed, like Georgia and others. What it does is say we can challenge them in the courts, which means you still have got to deal with these state courts. Luckily, North Carolina did the right thing in the state courts. So I think that it still gives us a lot of work to do. And also, I hope that this Supreme Court is not being fair on voting so they can bang us on affirmative action or bang us on student debt. We were expecting that the affirmative action decision would have come through today. And the student debt loan, they did not. So now we're waiting on Wednesday or Thursday. The session ends Thursday, so it has to come in the next 2 days. So I hope that we're not getting good decisions so we can get some bad ones. And they say, we were fair, we're not racist, we did this, that, and the other. And so my prayer is that we keep vigilant and make sure we do what needs to be done.
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, 1 step forward, please, Lord, we can't go 2 steps back.
Right.
And just like you said, I was very shocked at the decision too. I saw attorney Sherlyn Eiffel tweet out, Roberts is breaking some hearts, but we'll see how that continues to go as we move forward. And also when you talk about what's going to happen as a result, what is the backlash that may happen as a result in states, given the Supreme Court's ruling, how might the political landscape, you think, change for 2024 elections in other states? as we go forward?
I think that the landscape can change because if the courts make them redraw districts in North Carolina, as now the Supreme Court has said you must do in Louisiana and Alabama, we will pick up more congressional black caucus members and Democrats, which makes us closer to Hakeem Jeffries becoming the speaker. Because we're only about 5 to 6 seats down. If we're picking up 2 or 3 seats and can turn some of them seats like the 4 in New York that we lost to Republicans, one to an outright fraudster in George Santos, we would see a not only be able to see if we vote right, the Biden-Harris administration state, we would see the first black speaker of the House of Representatives, who I've known the last 25 years as a solid young brother. He's a member of National Action Network.
The implications of this are far-reaching as you've just laid out. What stuns me is even with what the GOP has been trying to do, it is almost like a boomerang. I was listening to Common Cause, who's a part of this case, and they were talking about had Republicans been able to get some of these laws through in 2020, it would have had a devastating effect even on the outcomes for Republicans, because it would have had a harsh delays in mail-in voting, allowing more people to challenge ballots, which we've seen in other states, the ability to toss out valid votes postmarked before the election day, and which are in effect also harming is the whole total of voting population, from students to veterans to seniors. And so sometimes I think we frame this issue, and of course I do many times, as how it harms Black and brown communities. But they got to see also how this is harming their own base. And so they're cutting off the nose to spite their whole face.
No, it hurts their base, and it also in many ways limits their options. Because if you had the reverse, let's take the Moore versus Harper case. If the reverse was that the court said, well, you couldn't challenge what the legislature did in court, once the legislature makes a decision, that's it. Well, if North Carolina ever got a mostly Democratic legislature, they couldn't challenge.
Right.
It was good for the goose, is good for the gander. And I think that you're right, they operate against their own interests, because that means in states that are, quote, blue states, they couldn't challenge those legislation. So it evens the playing field for everybody to have a check and balance.
And all this is backlash from, let us not forget, former President Donald Trump and his allies filing over 60 lawsuits contesting the 2020 presidential election. Now, we've seen voter restrictive laws well before that, but they really, to use another better word, trumped up some of these charges, because he lost just about every single case, I think, except for one in Pennsylvania, but every single case, whether they lost it or even his own team dropped the case. This is the backlash, the conservative, I would say the supremacist backlash that we're seeing because of that loss.
Right. And I think that you're seeing at the same time, what is troubling is that at the same time they're losing all these cases, and you see him under indictment, both federally and in state indictment, former President Trump. You see, the polls say his popularity is going up among Republicans. So it is very troubling that even those that are legally conservative saying, wait a minute, this is a bridge too far.
Yes.
And other situations in the courts where former President Trump has lost many of these challenges, you still have a hardcore group who seem to be, according to polls, the majority of the Republican Party voters that want to stand by him. So this is not a fight that, this is not one to take out the champagne and the cake, maybe get a cupcake and keep fighting.
Right. It's the time to really sleep with one eye open, because I'm telling you, they planted something around the corner. But before we go, I do want to get your reaction. You've been working closely with the family of A.J. Owens, who we saw. I I don't even know how to explain these cases one by one. Just when I feel like I'm not shocked, a case where a mother defending her child gets shot through a metal door by a white woman who's known to be racist in the area, and now prosecutors have decided not to file murder charges, but manslaughter charges.
I mean, it is in my opinion, the most unfair decision that I've seen in a long time, and I've seen a lot of it. Here's a woman who goes out, harasses kids. I mean, children, none of them teenagers, calls them the N-word and says that, what are you, slaves? This is not the Underground Railroad. And she admitted that to police that she said that. So it's not an accusation that someone's just grabbing out of the sky.
Right.
The mother comes to ask her, why would you subject my kids to that? Knocks on her door, she shoots through the door and kills the mother. As you know, I preached the funeral. I met with the kids. I met with the mother. I've been in church since. How you don't see that as murder? Then what is murder? Here's somebody shooting through the door on a situation she caused. Then how do you define murder in Ocala of Florida? What I've done, and National Action Network has, is call on the Justice Department to prosecute on hate crime. Because she's admitted using the N-word and admitted that she talked about them being slaves and wasn't the Underground Railroad, which meant that when she shot that bullet, it was based on her following up hate language. And we want to try to bring federal charges against this woman.
Well, Brad, thank you for the work that you are doing. It was great having this conversation with you on the record. And I absolutely look forward to talking with you again, because we're going to be talking about affirmative action, and we're going to be talking about what happens with student debt loan relief. Now, I'm going to be praying and saying prayers, lighting candles, and all types of stuff to see what happens.
Let's keep the prayers coming.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.